Show. I'm your host, and today we're just going to talk about the brain's role in communication. So, there's two parts of the brain that we're going to discuss. We're going to get down and discuss a few different things. We have two areas of the brain responsible for our communication. We have Wernicke's area, which is language comprehension. It's the part of the brain that has to do with the way we comprehend language. It's located in the temporal lobe area. And then we got Broca's area. Broca's area is all about speech production, and that's located in the frontal lobe of the brain. So what happens is these two areas of the brain, they work together. They work together to process, formulate, and articulate our thoughts into coherent language, coherent sentences. So that's what it's all about. And there are two types of statements that are going to be helpful. So the discussion for today is self-talk language. It's not going to be centered around talking to me. It's going to be centered on how you talk to yourself. So that's going to be the interesting thing about it. And sometimes how we speak to others is a direct connection to how we speak to ourselves. 9 out of 10, the language we use towards others can indeed connect to how we communicate to ourselves. So yeah, we'll have some fun with today and see if there's any messages at all. Only subscribers. So today I'm set to only subscribers, meaning the people that subscribe to me. So welcome aboard if anybody has arrived. Looks like we have one person that showed up and a whole bunch of people are supposed to come on board pretty soon. But today's topic is literally self-talk, just understanding the human brain as it relates to the way we communicate to ourselves, our self-talk. Think of it as the brain's role in our communication. Hello, everybody. I think I got a whole slew of people who just showed up. Welcome. Today's conversation, understanding the brain's role in communication. That's what it's all about. And we are going to talk about two parts of the brain. Because you know what? The bottom line to today's conversation is all about self-talk, how we communicate to ourselves. And you know what? How we communicate to others is just as important as how we communicate to ourselves. So there's two parts of the brain. There's Wernicke's area. Wernicke's area of the brain is literally connected to comprehension. It has to do with the way we comprehend things. That's located in the temporal lobe of the brain. And Broca's area, which is located in the frontal lobe, that's all about speech production. So you're going to get two types of self-talk statements. When you are talking to yourself in the privacy of your own mind, when you talk to yourself in the privacy of your own mind, it's going to make a difference as to how you do that. Some people will talk quietly in their head. They'll have a little quiet inner voice, inner dialogue that actually goes on. And then for other people, speaking out loud. And you know what? Speaking out loud is very healthy. A lot of people just feel the stigma. They're like, oh, I don't want to do it. There's other people around. Other people may think I'm weird, this, that, and the other thing. But there are people that sit at their desk at work and they talk out loud. It's kind of like talking to yourself. But there's a difference between talking to yourself in terms of positive self-talk versus having a conversation and assuming that there's another part of your personality. That's completely going down a different road of split personalities, and that's not the case at all. Not the case at all. So there's two types of statements that are going to be helpful. The two statements for your self-talk are the I statements, statements that begin with I. I am this, I am that, I am that. And as you know, well, you may not know, the letter I is solo. We use it solo in sentences, but it really is the first letter in the word identity. It connects to your identity. So whenever you use I, your identity follows. I believe this. And that means that whatever that belief is tied to the identity pretty strongly. And that's the thing. There's a fine line difference. And hear me out on this. There's a fine line difference between I live in New York and I am a New Yorker. If I say I am a New Yorker, that's very attached. In other words, that idea, it's like I consider myself a New Yorker. New York is connected to my identity. And it's a very strong opinion. It's a very strong belief. Not just an opinion, but it's a very strong belief. But when you say I live in New York, it's completely different ball of wax. You live there, but you're not attached to it so harshly, so heavily. So you have those I statements, and you also have those you statements. So the you statements and I statements, what they actually do is they engage the brain differently. That impacts both you speaking and the way you hear yourself. It has a different impact. So the you statements, when you use you, Y-O-U statements, that accesses the part of the brain called Wernicke's area. Wernicke's area is literally giving yourself commands and directives. Think of RoboCop. RoboCop had primary directives, right? He had like a set of rules that was like, these are my directives. And when you use statements like you, Y-O-U, they begin with you, those are directives, those are commands, and those are pushing you forward. Now, when you use it with other people, it could be accusation. That's why people get into arguments and fights. They say, you never do the dishes, and then they get all into a fight about it, right? A whole you. In order to blame, you have to point a finger and say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, right? So you got to remember that Wernicke's area is responsible for comprehension, Broca's area is responsible for speech production, and they work together. And you have the you statements and the I statements, they engage the brain differently, and they impact your speaking as well as what you hear. So how do we use this? How do we use this as a functional tool? Well, you statements are perceived as the directives and perceived as the commands. It's giving your brain a directive, it's giving your brain a command. And the part of the brain, Wernicke's area of the brain, that focuses on the emotional undertone of you, which can feel strong towards what you want to do and where you want to go. So the brain will focus on that as it has an emotional undertone to it. Now, where people misrepresent or misunderstand, the misinterpretation of the you statements, it can lead to defensive responses. So that's why I said when we use them with other people, we say, you never do the dishes, you never clean up, right? They can trigger the other person. They trigger the fight or flight of that other person. Where the you statements, when the you statements are used in Broca's area of the brain, when you formulate those you statements, it involves less personal introspection. You're not so introspective. So what happens is the Broca's area of the brain will start to process the you statements quickly, very quickly, as they externalize responsibility and they also are observational. That's why they work. That's why you statements actually work in the brain. So they why the you statements work is they bypass self-reflection. So what tends to happen is someone, you may say something like, I need to work out. I need to go exercise, right? And then there's a little bit of self-reflection that goes on. And if you don't want to work out, there could be some reactive communication. The brain could bring up emotional resistance. But when you have the you statements with YOU, they bypass self-reflection. That's why they work. They bypass self-reflection. Now, when you use them, you can use them in a way for opportunity. Telling yourself what to do. You can work out today. You are smart. You are intelligent. Having those statements that begin with you, your brain comprehends them differently than if you use statements that begin with I. So that's the whole thing. The I statements are powerful, but the you statements are equally powerful. Very important. Let me just see if there's any messages here. So when you use the I statements, self-referential, right? These are good for empathy. These are good for clarity. When you speak to other people and you wish to communicate in a more empathetic way, you can say, I need to understand this more. Or help me understand this. I need to understand this. Help me understand what it is you mean. So you start to use empathy a little bit more. So the I statements can be very empathetic in nature. The you statements can be very blamatory and can trigger people. So when you say, you never do the dishes, you never clean up, those are things. But when you use the you statements with yourself, you're actually getting yourself out of bed. Okay? You can go work out. You can get up. You need to work out. You must work out today. All right? These types of phrases giving directives and commands towards yourself to get up and go and do what you need to do. They really do help override a lot of emotional resistance that occurs. That's the whole thing. So the Wernicke's area of the brain, they decode the I statements as personal. Makes it very personal. There's an emotional resonance with them. And the reason why some people say, well, I need to work out, emotional resistance might come up very quickly when you're using those I statements. So what happens is they may take the back seat. That resistance might win. So there's emotional resonance with I statements. They're there to aid your comprehension. They're there to aid connection with other people. But the you statements are the directives that you can use. Now, with Broca's area, when it comes to Broca's area of the brain, when you are actively involved in crafting statements that begin with I, it requires self-awareness and introspection. So there's self-awareness and introspection that's there. So the statements with I, they demand a little bit more cognitive effort. There's more effort in the brain. All right? It engages in higher processes of the way we think. That's the first thing. So Broca's area of the brain supports the expression of emotions or statements that begin with the letter I. I need this, I need that. It gets all in there. So, what's the whole solution here? There's a dynamic. The communication, how we communicate to ourselves has a dynamic, simply put. It's the balance between Wernicke's area of the brain and Broca's area. And you know what it does is it shapes the effectiveness of how we communicate to ourselves. Simple. The you statements, they elicit immediate response. It prioritizes reacting over dialogue. So if you say, you must work out right now, it starts to get into action versus I need to work out, which gets into emotion. And that's the cut and dry difference between the two. So both of these areas need to work together for effective inner dialogue, effective self-communication, how you communicate to yourself, especially in conflict resolution with somebody else. You know, getting into an argument with somebody is really easy. All you got to do is say, you never, or you always, or you're the one who does blah, 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 right? So let's talk about the emotional impact. There's an emotional impact, and welcome aboard for those of you that just waltzed in. I got a whole slew of people just showed up. I just want to say hi. Hi, everybody. Let's talk about the emotional impact of these particular statements. When you use self-talk that begins with Y-O-U, it's very valuable because you're giving yourself a directive that leads to action. So when you need to take action in your life, begin your sentences with you. You must work out. You must get up. You have to do X. You need to do X. Be careful of should. I should work out, right? It's very wishy-washy kind of statement. Has to be more direct. Has to be a directive where it's directing you to do something. If you're mountain climbing and you're kind of terrified, you need to stretch your hand a little more to get to the next ledge, right? That's speaking out loud with you statements. When you use it with another person, it can be triggering to the other person. You always say this. You never say that. You never do the dishes. You always leave the garbage behind. Those are accusatory statements. Those are blamatory. Those are finger-pointing statements when they start with you. And people get into that, and they want to rationalize it in their head. But the bottom line is this is not how we necessarily talk to others, more so how we talk to ourselves in terms of giving ourselves directives to take action in our life with healthy self-talk. So with the you statements, they can trigger fight or flight in other people. Where the I statements, they're a little bit more, they engage a different pathway related to empathy and understand. Like, I didn't know you felt that way, you know? I wish you would have told me that before. You know, I wish you would have shared that with me. It's a little bit more empathetic, the statements with I. So that's why I like using I statements with other people, because they involve empathy, and you use statements that begin with you to give yourself a directive to move you towards your goals and take action. So there is a difference between the brain and the way it processes these things. The statements that start with you, they involve less of a mental load in your brain. So when you tell yourself you're going to go work out or you can work out, it's different. It's literally, it's a statement where you're moving yourself in a direction of what you want to do. So there is a difference between the I statements, statements of empathy when you're speaking to somebody else, and the you statements. If you're trying to work out and your brain says, oh, I need to work out, emotional resistance will come up because it connects to emotion. But when you tell yourself you're going to go work out or you must work out now, it's a little bit different. So I'd like to tell you that when you use statements that begin with you, there's a little bit more of a deliberate communication style. It's more deliberate. It's action-oriented language. So let's talk about it. In conflict resolution, when you're resolving conflict with somebody else, it's going to be the I statements that are going to be helpful. So why is that, though? Why is that? Because They reduce the likelihood of escalation because it's engaging the empathetic process. Got it? Where the you statements can lead to miscommunication with other people. You never or you always, those generalizations. In order to be negative, you just have to put generalizations on other people and you'll trigger them very quickly. So when you speak to yourself for behavioral outcomes, it's going to be the you statements that act as a directive. When you use the I statements, they do encourage ownership and accountability, but emotions can come up and cause resistance. Again, we're discussing on this particular video how mindful communication can actually impact what we wish to do in terms of exercise in our life. It's the self-talk that guides us and directs us. And that's what's going to be really important. All right. And that's all there is for today. A whole bunch of people decided to come in and leave and come back, and that's okay. But I wanted to just share there is a fine line difference between the I statements and a fine line difference between the you statements. When you are installing beliefs, the I statements can be good. I believe in XYZ versus you. You are the type of person that works out. Think about that. Try saying that out loud. You are the type of person that works out all the time. It's interesting. Very interesting. Anyway, that's it for today. Have a great day. See you in the next episode.